Hi, this is Nicole Dyer with the Research Like a Pro with DNA question and answer series. Today's video is called Why Document DNA Test Takers Parent-Child Links Before Research Planning. And in this video, I share an experience where I was writing a research report where I had chosen several different DNA matches using Pro Tools, and they were sharing with different descendants of my research subject who I then designate as test takers. Usually we start with, ourselves and our parent or uncle as our test takers, but I was adding more test takers into the mix to show that the DNA matches shared adequate amounts with these people. So I kind of talked about how it took a lot longer to write my research report because I was working on documenting all of these lines of descent. So the tip that I'm sharing is just about doing as much of this legwork before your research planning as possible so you can include it in your research plan if you know you're going to be needing to do this kind of thing. So hopefully this video will help you if you are also trying to use Ancestry Pro Tools to add in additional test takers to your body of evidence, showing how they share with the hypothesized relationships in your study, and just about how to document those lines of descent in the appendix so that you can have that parent-child evidence that you need. All right, well, for today's tip, our theme for the month is research planning. And the tip that I have is to document your lines of descent for your starting test takers before you do your research planning. And the reason I've added this as a tip is that I have recently been working on documenting lines of descent for test takers. Now, when I say a starting test taker, I mean one of the people whose DNA matches you have access to see. So you have tested your own DNA maybe, and maybe your cousins. Then if you're looking at both of these kits matches, then these are your starting test takers, right? Now, maybe you've asked a second cousin to test, maybe you've tested an uncle, and now you have 4 starting test takers, and you can look at all of their matches. I consider those to be your starting test takers. Other people call this your base test takers. The challenge is that now with Ancestry Pro Tools, we can see how much all the shared matches share with each other. So it's giving us the ability to add in a lot more pairwise matches into our evidence, into our data. So it's less important to say this person is a person whose kid I can see their matches to, except for when you're thinking about coverage, because with coverage, you focus only on those people who've actually given you access to their kits because you can see all their matches. But when you're thinking about evidence between 2 groups of people, you can use these other people you find in Pro Tools shared matches in Ancestry. And of course, we could always do that in MyHeritage too, and the other companies like 23andMe. Well, when we start seeing all of these lines of descent and maybe adding in a few new test takers, we should be documenting how they descend from the common ancestor or the research subject. And that means, finding some sort of source that gives us evidence for the parent-child relationship in the diagram going back each generation. And if we can't do this, then we can't really use them as evidence in our final proof argument or report. And so it's really important that we document these lines of descent with a source citation showing either an obituary, a census that shows relationships, something that can help us get from this person to this person with some sort of source citation or documentation. So it's important to do this with our starting test takers, of course. And in my current research report that I'm working on, I hadn't done this for 2 of the test takers. They had shared their matches with me a while ago, and I didn't think about the fact that I should do this. And so when I was writing the report, I had to go and find evidence for each line back to the common ancestor with them. And I realized I had some avenues for research that I needed to do. And I was supposed to be writing my report at this point. So if you do this documentation before your research planning, it helps you catch any parent-child relationships without sufficient evidence that you can then add to your research plan to do. And you can add that documentary research to your plan and get it done in the research phase. So that's why I recommend doing it before, and this can be done during the kind of analysis of close matches phase where we're making the timeline, we're looking at all of our amounts of shared DNA that we share with our starting test takers and close matches, and just kind of verifying that everyone matches each other and the amount that you would expect. And then once you get to research planning, if you notice there were some links that you need to add on to, you can do that. Like I said, with Ancestry Pro Tools shared matches and how it shows us how many shared centimorgans are shared between the shared matches, we can now add additional starting test takers. So I'll show you an example of that. So for example, in my research question, I wanted to know if the descendants of Sally Reeves matched the descendants of William Keaton to see if Sally was also a daughter of William Keaton. And I did find this person, I'll call her Andrea. And I found that Andrea was a descendant of Sally Reeves, who I think is Sally Keaton Reeves. And John is one of my starting test takers. He's a descendant of William Keaton through Lucinda. And so they share 20 centimorgans. But I wanted to have another William Keaton descendant sharing with Andrea just to make sure that this 20 centimorgans, which is kind of a smaller amount, isn't just a population segment that's been passed down and looks bigger than it, really is. It looks like a closer match than it is. And so I searched through the shared matches. Over here, you can see I went to shared matches. I have Pro Tools. I clicked on search. So I wanted to search through the shared matches between John and Andrea. And I typed in Keaton because I want to find another test taker, like who I can add to my starting test takers, who shares DNA with this Andrea. And so I found these two who have the Keaton surname in their trees. And looking at their trees, I did find that they are descendants of William Keaton. And they're actually through different children than John. So John is through Lucinda, William Keaton's daughter, and these two are through two different sons of William Keaton. So they share 33 and 39 centimorgans with Andrea. So that adds a lot more evidence to my body of evidence. Now I can show much better pedigree triangulation, and I have multiple lines of descent from William Keaton showing they all go back to William Keaton through different children. So now I want to document the lines of descent from Susan all the way back to William Keaton and Erica all the way back to William Keaton, who lived in the 1700s and died in 1830. So that's exciting to be able to do that. And it also adds in additional research and documentation that needs to be done. And so with the project I'm working on, these are the new test takers that I've been able to add who descend from William Keaton, not through Sally. Sally's the daughter that I'm trying to prove. Abner, Reuben, Archibald, and Lucinda, I have evidence tracing their lines down. But Sally, we'll put Sally over here. Sally's descendants were unknown prior to my research on this. All I knew is that she had married William Reeves and then they got lost in Tennessee. I didn't know where they went. So when I found the DNA matches descending from Sarah Reeves, I wanted to prove they had matched all of these people, and they do. So this was exciting to be able to find, and now I had to write the documentation for all of these, which I was able to do, but it was time consuming. So if you know you want to do this and you see these people in your tree, you can work on this documentation before you get to the research planning. Although sometimes you don't know that you need to do this beforehand. And so these people were all new test takers that I added. But going back to my tip, if you're using DNA matches from you, your uncle, and your cousin, at least get those lines of descent documented back to, for example, William Keaton before you get started, because you'll at least have those 3 legs of the pedigree triangulation done for the documentation. So hopefully that helps get you thinking about some of the things to do before you get to research planning. And then, of course, add into your research planning that you will want to work on the documentation for the lines of descent that you discover. And of course, we're going to probably sometimes find more matches than we want to use. So I found way more matches than I used, and I only documented the lines of descent for the ones that I actually decided to use in the report. And my report is kind of more of a proof argument. I wanted it to be getting ready to create a proof argument, so I'm trying to get it all documented. sometimes you can put this into future research to do the documentation later. All right, so that's our tip for the month. Hopefully that helps you as you're thinking about research planning and what you might need to add into your plan. Do we have any comments or questions about that?
Well, the cracky voice today. Well, I have one. So just tell us really quick how you're actually writing up this lines of descent in your appendix. Are you um, writing it in narrative? Are you doing bullet points with
This is how I do it.
citations?
I start at the top and I say, well, I've already proven William Keaton to all his children. So I start at Abner Keaton and I say, for Abner Keaton to Elizabeth Keaton Agnew, C, and then I just paste the source citation from my research log showing for this one, it was a will, Abner's will, named Elizabeth Agnew. And then in a new paragraph, I say, for Elizabeth Keaton Agnew to Annie Catherine Agnew Caldwell, C, and then I paste the source citation. So it's just source citations in paragraph format. I'm not using footnotes in the appendix for this.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
just putting it like that.
Yeah.
And then anything that I do need to write more than that, I will add in like a kind of like a discursive note that says, some of these there wasn't anything like a will. So I just had to say, for Reuben to William, C, inferred son status on the 18 whatever census. I don't think there was a census for that. Might have been for this. And then see also their proximity in this tax record. And then sometimes I'll put in red a note to myself, need more evidence because there's not really that much. But knowing that they match all these other people, it's part of the body of evidence. So sometimes I don't feel like I need that much more than maybe a census and a proximity type of thing. So I'll just put those two, and sometimes I'll have three. But if it's much more than that, then I will try to include it in the narrative in the actual report, like for these, like for Sally and all of her children. I'll put the evidence for those relationships. And so sometimes I'll say, like, for Sally to this child, see the narrative or see the text, because I've talked about why they should be considered a proven child in the actual report narrative. Then for the next generation, I'll say, see this source citation, see this census.
Nice. And then I am just assuming that in the report you've got a matrix that's showing how everybody shares DNA with everybody else.
So what I'm
Is that how
doing
you're
is
doing it?
for each of Sally's children, because I found matches for like 5 of her children, I have a table showing how Sally's descendants in one column share DNA with William Keaton's descendants. And so I could do a matrix. I might add one in at the end, but for now I'm doing just these pairwise comparisons between Sally's descendants and then
Then just various
Williams.
Williams. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. Well, those are my questions. So thanks for sharing that. That was great.
Thanks. Yeah, and this is so much work. It's exciting when I can find that one of Sally's descendants already matches one of these people, so I don't have to add in another one. And I keep vowing to myself I will not be adding any more. If Sally's descendant doesn't match as one of these people, or my starting Lucinda test takers, which are in a different diagram, then I'm not including that match at all.
Well, that's a
So,
good lesson in just being judicious with the matches you want to use and
right, I just
realize,
figured
yeah,
I don't
you
need to
don't
use all of them. So,
exactly. It's great.